The rifle barrel was cold against Rowan Hale's temple. Not as cold as the floor beneath his knees. Not as cold as the wind screaming through gaps in the cabin walls, carrying snow that settled on his shoulders like ash from a funeral pyre. But cold enough to remind him he was still alive. For now. He'd been alive too long already. 3 years. 3 years of waking up to silence so thick it pressed against his eardrums. 3 years of coffee boiled alone, of meals eaten standing at the counter because sitting at the table meant staring at empty chairs. 3 years of hunting game he didn't taste, chopping wood he barely needed, existing in a routine that kept his hands busy and his mind just numb enough to make it through another day. The cabin was a tomb he'd built himself. One room, rough-hewn logs chinked with mud and moss, a stone fireplace that threw more smoke than heat, a cot in the corner with blankets that smelled like mildew and old sweat, shelves sagging under the weight of supplies. He restocked twice a year when he made the trek down to Millstone, supplies that would outlast him now. Above the fireplace hung a photograph in a warped frame, a woman with kind eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them, her hand resting on the shoulder of a boy who looked too much like Rowan used to. Sarah. Thomas. His wife. His son. Dead 5 years now. He'd stopped looking at the photograph 2 years ago. Stopped because every time he did, he heard Sarah's voice asking him why he was still here, why he'd survived the fever that took them both within 3 days of each other. Stopped because Thomas's face and his memory was starting to blur around the edges, and that terrified him more than anything. The rifle was a Winchester, well-oiled, reliable. He'd used it to take down elk, to scare off a mountain lion that got too curious one summer. Never missed a shot. Wouldn't miss this one either. His finger rested on the trigger, not pressing yet, just feeling the curve of it, the slight resistance. It would be easy, quick. One moment of pressure and then nothing. No more silence, no more ghosts, no more waking up to realize he'd been dreaming about them again, that they were still gone, that he was still here. Outside, the blizzard hammered the mountainside with the kind of fury that made even the trees bend. It had been building for 2 days, and now it was in full force, a whiteout so complete that Rowan couldn't see past the window. The wind didn't howl, it roared, a freight train of ice and rage that shook the cabin's frame and found every crack in the walls. Perfect conditions. If anyone found him, and no one would, not for months, they'd assume he'd frozen, gotten careless, ran out of firewood, or lost his way in the storm. It happened up here. People disappeared into the mountains and didn't come back. He closed his eyes. The trigger felt heavier than it should, and then a sound, faint, distant, barely audible over the storm's fury. A scream. Rowan's eyes snapped open. He stayed frozen, rifle still pressed to his head, breath caught in his chest. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe his mind was playing tricks, giving him an excuse to hesitate, to be a coward one more time. Then it came again. Definitely a scream. Human, high-pitched with terror or pain or both, coming from somewhere out in the storm. "No," he said aloud, his voice hoarse from disuse. "No, no, no." His hands started to shake. Someone was out there. In this. In a blizzard that could kill in minutes, that was already piling snow 3 feet deep on the level ground, and twice that in the drifts. Someone was dying. He could ignore it. Pull the trigger right now. Whatever was happening out there would happen whether he intervened or not. One more death on a mountain that had seen thousands. One more body the snow would cover until spring. His finger tightened on the trigger. The scream came a third time, weaker now, swallowed almost immediately by the wind. "God damn it," Rowan whispered. He lowered the rifle, set it on the floor with shaking hands, pressed his palms against his face, and felt the stubble of 3 days without shaving, felt the grooves the cold had carved into his skin. He didn't want to do this, didn't want to care, didn't want to step back into a world where actions mattered and choices had consequences. He'd built this isolation carefully, brick by brick, until the walls were high enough that nothing could reach him. But the scream had reached him, and now he couldn't unhear it. Rowan pushed himself to his feet, legs unsteady. He was thin, too thin. Meals skipped, weight lost, a body that had been slowly consuming itself because he hadn't cared enough to stop it. But he was still strong enough, still capable. Muscle memory from years of labor hadn't completely faded. He grabbed his coat from the peg by the door, thick wool, patched in 6 places, smelling like smoke and pine, pulled on boots that were more repair than original leather, wrapped a scarf around his face until only his eyes showed, found his gloves, his hat, his snowshoes. The blizzard hit him like a fist when he opened the door. Wind tore the breath from his lungs. Snow blasted his face with enough force to sting even through the scarf. The cold wasn't just cold. It was a living thing, predatory, searching for any exposed skin to sink its teeth into. Temperature had to be 20 below, maybe 30 with the wind chill. Rowan leaned into it and started walking. He couldn't see more than 5 feet ahead. The world was white chaos, sky and ground blurred into one continuous scream of winter, trying to erase everything it touched. He knew this mountain, knew every ridge and gully, but in a whiteout like this, knowledge didn't matter. One wrong step and he'd walk right off a cliff. The scream had come from the east, he thought, down toward where the old stage road cut through the valley. That road saw maybe 2 or 3 coaches a month in summer, none in winter. Anyone stupid enough to be on it in this storm deserved what they got, except they were still screaming. He pushed forward, snowshoes sinking deep with each step. His lungs burned. His face went numb within minutes. Ice formed on his eyelashes, making it even harder to see. Every instinct told him to turn back, to get inside before the storm killed him too. He kept walking. Time stopped meaning anything. Could have been 10 minutes, could have been an hour. Just the endless repetition of lifting one snowshoe, planting it, shifting weight, lifting the other. The wind tried to shove him sideways, tried to turn him around, tried to make him lose his bearings. Then he saw it, a dark shape in the white, angular, wrong. Rowan stumbled toward it, nearly fell, caught himself on something solid. Wood, a wheel, half buried in a drift. He followed the line of it with his gloved hands and found the coach. It was overturned, lying on its side in a gully he hadn't known was there. The horses were gone, either run off or dead somewhere in the snow. The driver's seat was empty, blood frozen black on the splintered wood. One door hung open, banging against the frame in the wind. "Hello?" Rowan's voice was lost immediately. He tried again, louder. "Anyone there?" No answer. He pulled himself up onto the overturned coach, boots slipping on ice-slicked wood, and looked down into the passenger compartment. A woman lay crumpled at the bottom, half covered in snow that had blown through the open door. She wasn't moving. "Hey!" Rowan dropped down beside her, landing hard on his knees. "Hey, can you hear me?" Still nothing. He pulled off his glove and pressed 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. Her skin was ice cold, lips blue, face pale as death. There. Faint. Thready. But there. She was alive. Barely. Rowan looked around the ruined coach. A leather satchel was clutched in her arms, frozen to her chest by layers of ice. She'd been holding it when she'd gone down, holding it like it mattered more than keeping her hands warm. Documents, maybe. Or money. People did stupid things for money. He grabbed her shoulders and shook gently. "Wake up, come on, you have to wake up." Her eyelids fluttered, just for a second, long enough for him to see her eyes were dark, brown, or maybe deep green, hard to tell in this light, before they rolled back and closed again. Not good. Hypothermia, advanced stage. Maybe frostbite. Definitely exposure. If he left her here, she'd be dead within the hour. If he tried to move her and failed, they'd both be dead within 2. Rowan knelt there in the wrecked coach, wind screaming overhead, snow piling up around them, and felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him like the rifle barrel had been pressing against his skull 20 minutes ago. He could leave her, climb back out, head for his cabin, finish what he'd started. She'd never know. No one would ever know. But he'd know. And that was the problem. "All right," he said, mostly to himself. "All right, we're doing this." He pried the satchel from her grip. Her fingers were frozen in place. He had to work them loose one at a time, and slung it over his shoulder. Then he got his arms under her, one beneath her knees, one behind her back, and lifted. She was heavier than she looked. Dead weight. No help from her at all. And he was weaker than he'd thought. His arms shook immediately. His back screamed. But he got her up, got her balanced, got one foot on a piece of wreckage, and hauled himself out of the coach. The blizzard was worse now, if that was possible. The wind had shifted, coming straight down from the peaks, carrying enough ice to flay skin. Rowan couldn't feel his face anymore. Couldn't feel his hands. The woman in his arms was just weight, just burden, and every step back toward the cabin felt like trying to walk through concrete. He fell 3 times. The first time he managed to twist so she landed on top of him, cushioned her fall with his body, and felt something in his ribs crack. The second time they both went down hard, and he had to dig through snow to find her again, panic rising in his chest because for a horrible moment he thought he'd lost her, thought the mountain had swallowed her whole. The third time, he didn't think he could get back up. His legs wouldn't work. His arms were numb. The cold had sunk so deep into his core that he couldn't remember what warm felt like. It would be easy to just stay here, lie down in the snow, let it cover them both. Peaceful, quiet. But then he thought about the rifle, about how close he'd been to pulling that trigger, about how he'd chosen to open the door instead, to step back into the storm, to try. And trying meant finishing. Rowan pushed himself up, hooked his arms under the woman's shoulders and dragged her. Just dragged her through the snow, stumbling blind, following muscle memory and prayer and whatever stubborn part of his brain still knew which direction was home. When he hit the cabin door with his shoulder, he almost sobbed with relief. Inside. He got them inside, kicked the door shut, and stood there in the sudden absence of wind, breathing hard, ice crackling off his coat. The woman was unconscious still. Her lips were darker blue now. He had maybe minutes. Rowan laid her on the floor in front of the fireplace and started ripping off her frozen clothes. Coat, dress, stockings, all of it stiff with ice and snow, some of it frozen to her skin. He worked fast, efficient, no room for modesty or second thoughts. Hypothermia killed. Fast. He'd seen it before. Her skin was mottled, white and purple in patches. Frostbite on her fingertips. Maybe her toes, too. He couldn't tell yet. But she was breathing. Still breathing. He piled every blanket he owned onto her, then fed the fire until it roared, eating through wood he'd been rationing. Heat flooded the cabin. Too much heat almost, but she needed it. Needed her core temperature brought back up slowly before her body gave up completely. Rowan collapsed into the chair beside the fireplace, still wearing his coat, snow melting off his shoulders and pooling on the floor. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't make them stop. The crack in his ribs sent a sharp spike of pain through his chest every time he breathed. He looked at the woman on his floor, really looked at her for the first time. Young, maybe late 20s. Dark hair plastered to her skull tangled with ice. Fine features, but hard somehow. Something in the set of her jaw, the line of her mouth, that spoke of someone who'd learned not to smile unless she meant it. Bruises on her wrists. Old ones, faded to yellow. And what might have been a burn scar running up her left forearm. The satchel sat next to her, snow melting off its leather surface. Rowan picked it up. Heavy. He undid the clasp and looked inside. Documents, legal papers by the look of them, deeds, contracts, a stack of letters tied with string. And money. A lot of money. More cash than he'd seen in 5 years. None of it explained why she'd been out in this storm, or why she'd rather die than let go of this bag. He closed the satchel and set it aside. The woman's breathing changed, slower now, but deeper. Her color was coming back, just barely. Pink starting to replace blue. She might make it, might. Rowan stood and walked to the window. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault. Snow piled against the glass. Wind rattled the shutters. The world beyond his cabin had ceased to exist, just white and cold and death waiting for anything stupid enough to venture out. He'd been out there, had gone back out into it, had saved someone. Why? The rifle sat on the floor where he'd left it, next to the empty depression in the wood where his knees had worn the finish smooth over the past 3 years. Rowan picked it up and put it back on its rack above the door. Not because he was done with it, not because something had fundamentally changed, but because he had a problem now. An immediate problem that required him to stay alive at least a little longer. The woman on his floor was evidence of that. Behind him, she stirred. Just a small movement, a shift under the blankets. Rowan turned. Her eyes were open. They locked onto him immediately, and what he saw there wasn't gratitude or relief or confusion. It was fear. Raw, animal fear. The look of someone who'd learned the hard way that being found wasn't always the same as being saved. Don't, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but sharp as broken glass. Don't touch me. Rowan raised his hands slowly, showing empty palms. You're safe. You were in a... Where am I? She tried to sit up, couldn't, fell back against the blankets with a gasp of pain. Where's my bag? The stagecoach crashed. I found you. Your bag's right there. He pointed. You're in my cabin. Storm's too bad, too. Give it to me. She wasn't asking. Her hand reached out, shaking so badly she couldn't control it, but reaching anyway. Give me the bag. Now. He picked it up and held it out. She snatched it, pulled it against her chest the same way she'd been holding it in the coach. Protective. Desperate. They stared at each other across the small space of the cabin. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the storm screamed. Who are you? She asked finally. Rowan Hale. This is my cabin. You're about 8 miles up from the valley road. 8 miles. She closed her eyes. God, how long was I? Don't know. Found you maybe an hour ago. You've been out the whole time. She looked at him again, studying him with eyes that were definitely green now that the color was coming back to her face, looking for something. Threat assessment, he realized. She was trying to figure out if he was going to hurt her. I'm not going to hurt you, Rowan said quietly. That's what they all say. The way she said it, flat, matter of fact, made something cold settle in his stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature. The driver, she said. Did you find him? Is he... No sign of him. Probably thrown when the coach went over. Storm's too bad to look. Her jaw tightened. He's dead then. Likely. She didn't react to that, just held her bag tighter and looked at the window, at the white chaos beyond it. How long until the storm breaks? Day, maybe 2. Hard to tell with these winter blizzards. A day. She laughed, and it was a bitter, broken sound. I don't have a day. You're stuck with what you've got. Can't go out in that. It'll kill you. Things worse than storms, she muttered, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. Rowan settled back into his chair, keeping distance between them. His ribs ached. His hands were starting to regain feeling, which meant they hurt like hell. But he stayed still, non-threatening, giving her space to process. She watched him the whole time. Didn't relax. Didn't let go of the bag. What's your name? He asked after a long silence. She hesitated. Elena. Elena Voss? Where were you heading, Elena? Away. Another pause. Just away. That told him enough. People ran from things up here, bad marriages, bad debts, bad decisions. The mountains were full of people trying to disappear. Some succeeded. Some ended up dead in ravines. Some ended up like him, alive but not living, existing in spaces between the world and whatever came after. Well, Rowan said slowly, you picked a hell of a time to run. Didn't exactly plan on the storm. Nobody does. It came up fast. Elena shifted slightly, testing her body. Winced. Did you? Hypothermia. Frostbite on your fingers. Maybe your toes. I got your wet clothes off. You'd be dead if I hadn't. She looked down at herself, at the blankets covering her, at the pile of her frozen clothes near the fire. Her face went carefully blank. Thank you, she said, and he could hear the effort it took. Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this. What do you mean? Rowan gestured at the window. Storm like this, we could be snowed in for days. I've got food, wood, water. We'll survive. But after... He stopped. Thought about what came after. About whoever she was running from. About why she'd rather freeze than let go of that bag. About the fear in her eyes when she first woke up. After, you'll have decisions to make. I've already made them. Have you? It wasn't a question. She heard that. Her eyes narrowed. You don't know anything about me. Don't need to. You're running from something bad enough that you'd risk this mountain in winter. That's all I need to know. Then why ask? Good question. Why was he asking? Why did he care? An hour ago, he'd been ready to paint his cabin walls with his brains. Now he was sitting here making conversation with a stranger who looked at him like he might be the next thing she needed to escape. Maybe because this was a distraction. Maybe because another person in this space, even a hostile one, was better than the silence. Maybe because he was a coward who'd take any excuse not to finish what he'd started. Don't know, he admitted finally. Guess I'm just tired of my own company. Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but a recognition, maybe. Like she understood that particular kind of tired. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. The storm hammered the walls, and two broken people sat across from each other in a mountain cabin, trapped together by weather and circumstance and the choices that had led them both to this moment. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the beginning. Not of something good necessarily, but of something that would change everything. The first night was the worst. Elena refused to sleep, just sat there, wrapped in blankets, back against the wall, eyes tracking every move Rowan made. When he got up to add wood to the fire, she flinched. When he went to the corner to check his water supply, her hand disappeared under the blankets, reaching for something, though what weapon she could have found in her frozen clothes, he had no idea. "You should rest," he said around midnight, his own exhaustion pressing down like a physical weight. "Your body needs it." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You nearly died out there." "I said I'm fine." Her voice had an edge that could cut. "I don't need you telling me what I need." Rowan held up his hands in surrender and retreated to his cot in the corner. Lay down with his back to her, giving her space, giving her the illusion of safety, even though they both knew, if he wanted to hurt her, the 20 feet between them wouldn't matter. But he didn't want to hurt her. Didn't want anything from her except for her to stop looking at him like he was the wolf and she was the rabbit. He closed his eyes and tried not to think about the rifle, about how close he'd been, about how that plan had been simple, just one moment of courage or cowardice, depending on how you looked at it, and then nothing. No complications, no strangers, no fear in someone's eyes because of him. Sleep didn't come. Behind him, he could hear Elena's breathing, shallow, irregular, the rhythm of someone forcing themselves to stay awake. The fire crackled, the wind screamed. Hours crawled past like wounded animals. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, her breathing finally evened out, deep, steady. She'd lost the fight against exhaustion. Rowan opened his eyes and stared at the wall. Now he couldn't sleep because he was listening to make sure she kept breathing, making sure hypothermia didn't creep back in the night and finish what the storm had started. When had he started caring if she lived or died? When had that switch flipped? He didn't have an answer, didn't want to look for one. Dawn came late and gray, barely distinguishable from night. The storm hadn't let up. If anything, it had intensified. Snow pressed against the window so thick Rowan couldn't see anything beyond it, just white. The cabin walls shuddered under wind gusts that sounded like freight trains. Elena was still asleep, curled on her side, the satchel tucked between her body and the wall. Even unconscious, she was protecting it. Rowan moved quietly, building up the fire, putting coffee on to boil. His ribs screamed every time he bent or twisted. Definitely cracked, maybe broken. Nothing to do about it except bind them tight and wait for them to heal. He'd done it before, years ago, when a falling tree branch had caught him wrong. The coffee smell filled the cabin. Strong, bitter, the cheap kind that tasted like dirt but had enough kick to get you moving. Elena stirred, her eyes snapping open with the same instant alertness she'd had last night, the kind that came from never feeling safe enough to truly rest. She looked at him, then at the coffee, then back at him. "Morning," Rowan said. "Is it?" She pushed herself up slowly, testing her body. Winced. "Doesn't look much different than last night." "Storm's still going. Probably will be for another day at least." Perfect. The word was acid. She reached for her clothes, still spread near the fire, and touched them experimentally, still damp. "Great. I've got spare clothes. They'll be big, but they're dry. I don't want your charity." "It's not charity, it's survival. You can't sit around in blankets for 2 days." She glared at him, jaw set, and for a moment he thought she'd refuse just on principle. Then she looked down at herself, at the blankets that were her only covering, and something in her expression cracked. "Fine," she said quietly. "Fine. Thank you." Rowan pulled a trunk from under his cot and dug out an old flannel shirt, wool pants that would need a belt to stay up, thick socks. He set them on the floor halfway between them and retreated back to the fireplace, turning his back to give her privacy. He heard the rustle of blankets, the soft sounds of her dressing. Then silence. "You're back," Elena said. Rowan glanced over his shoulder. She was dressed now, swimming in his clothes, the shirt hanging nearly to her knees, but she was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. "What about it?" "The way you're holding yourself. You're hurt. Bruised a rib when we fell. It's nothing." "Let me see." "I'm fine." "You said that's what I said last night, and you didn't believe me." She took a step closer. "Let me see." He didn't move. Didn't know why he was resisting. Maybe because having her actually look at him, felt like exposure he wasn't ready for. Maybe because the last person who touched him with any kind of care had been Sarah, and that was 5 years and a lifetime ago. But Elena was already moving around him, her hands reaching for the hem of his shirt before he could stop her. She lifted it, and he heard her sharp intake of breath. "That's not bruised," she said. You cracked it, maybe broke it completely." "I know." "And you carried me 8 miles with broken ribs." Didn't have much choice. Her hands were still on his back, cool against his skin, not examining anymore, just resting there. He could feel her trembling slightly. "Why?" she asked, so quietly he barely heard it. "Why did you do that?" "Someone needed help." "That's not a reason. People need help all the time. Most people don't risk their lives for strangers." Rowan pulled away gently, tugging his shirt back down, turned to face her. "Didn't feel like I had a choice in the moment. Heard you scream, couldn't unhear it." You could have ignored it." "Yeah, I could have. But you didn't." "No." She studied him, those green eyes searching for something, trying to figure him out, trying to understand what kind of man lived alone on a mountain and still chose to walk into a blizzard for a stranger. The kind who was too much of a coward to pull the trigger, he thought. The kind who needed a reason to keep breathing, even if that reason was just carrying someone else through the snow. But he didn't say that. "Coffee's ready," he said instead, breaking the moment. "You should eat something too. I've got beans, some dried meat. Not fancy, but it's food." Elena nodded slowly and moved back to her spot against the wall. Sat down carefully, wincing. "Everything hurts. That's the frostbite. Your fingers are going to hurt worse over the next few days as feeling comes back." "You sound like you know from experience." "I do." He poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and she jerked back slightly. Still didn't trust him, still ready to bolt or fight if he gave her any reason. They drank in silence. The coffee was terrible, but it was hot. Outside, the wind hit a pitch that made the whole cabin groan. "This place going to hold?" Elena asked. "It's held for 3 years. It'll hold now." 3 years? You've been up here alone for 3 years?" "Yeah." "Why?" Fair question. Deserved an answer. Rowan looked at the photograph above the fireplace, the one he'd stopped looking at 2 years ago but could never bring himself to take down. Elena followed his gaze. Saw it. Her expression shifted. Understanding, maybe. Or pity. He wasn't sure which was worse. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. It was a long time ago. Doesn't matter how long ago it was. Loss is loss." She said it like she knew. Like she'd lost things too. Maybe that's why she was running with a bag full of papers and money, looking over her shoulder like someone was coming for her. "What are you running from?" Rowan asked. Elena's face closed down immediately. "That's not your business. You're in my cabin, wearing my clothes, drinking my coffee. I pulled you out of a frozen wreck and probably saved your life. I think I've earned some kind of explanation." "You haven't earned anything. I didn't ask you to save me." "Would you rather I'd left you there?" "Maybe." The word hung between them, sharp and honest and terrible. Rowan set his coffee down, leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You don't mean that." "Don't tell me what I mean." Her voice was shaking now, control slipping. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've—" She stopped, breathed, reset. "Just because you saved my life doesn't mean you own it." "Never said I did." "Then stop asking questions. I'm just trying to understand." "There's nothing to understand. I was on a stagecoach. It crashed. End of story. In the middle of a blizzard, with a bag you won't let out of your sight, running from something bad enough that you'd rather die than let it catch you. Elena's jaw clenched. Drop it. Someone's coming for you, aren't they? That's why you keep watching the door, why you can't sleep. You think they're going to find you even up here. I said drop it. Who is he? Rowan pressed, something in him needing to know, needing to understand what kind of fear put that look in someone's eyes. Husband? Father? Someone you owe money to? Elena stood up fast, blankets falling away. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. You want to know? Fine. His name is Judge Marcus Thornton. He owns half the territory from here to Denver, and yes, he's coming for me. Not because I owe him money, not because I'm his wife, but because I took something from him, and men like Marcus Thornton don't let people take from them without consequences. The name hit Rowan like cold water. He knew that name. Everyone in this part of the territory knew that name. Marcus Thornton wasn't just a judge. He was power incarnate. Land, mining rights, water contracts, politicians in his pocket. The kind of man who made problems disappear and called it justice. You stole from Marcus Thornton, Rowan said slowly. I took what was mine. There's a difference. Not to him there isn't. I know that. Elena's voice cracked. You think I don't know that? I know exactly what he'll do if he catches me. That's why I was trying to get to Denver. Had a lawyer there who said he could help. Said with the right documentation, the right witnesses, we could... She stopped, laughed bitterly. Doesn't matter now. The papers are probably ruined from the snow. The lawyer's probably dead. And I'm trapped on a mountain with nowhere left to run. She sank back down, all the fight draining out of her. Put her face in her hands. Didn't cry. Just sat there, shoulders shaking with the effort of not crying. Rowan didn't know what to say. Didn't know what comfort looked like anymore. So he did the only thing he could think of, got up, pulled the satchel over, and opened it. Hey, Elena started. Just looking. He pulled out the stack of papers. They were damp, but not destroyed. The leather had protected them better than she thought. What are these? Deeds, property deeds, and contracts. His contracts. The ones he forced people to sign when they couldn't pay their debts. The ones that gave him ownership of their land, their businesses, their lives. Rowan unfolded one carefully, read the cramped handwriting, the legal language, the signature at the bottom. A farmer in a town called Millstone, Rowan's town, signing over his land for a fraction of its worth because Thornton held his debts and was calling them due. How did you get these? I worked for him. In his house. I saw everything, heard everything. He treated his staff like furniture, didn't even notice us most of the time. And when he got drunk, he got careless, left his office unlocked, left these papers out. So you took them? I took them, Elena confirmed. Took them and ran. Because someone needed to. Someone needed to show people what he really is. And you thought a lawyer in Denver would help you do that. I thought... She stopped, started again. I thought maybe if enough people saw what he'd done, maybe if we could prove it, maybe it would matter. Maybe justice would actually mean something for once instead of just being whatever Marcus Thornton says it is. Rowan looked at the papers in his hands, looked at Elena, looked at the storm still raging outside. That's a lot of maybes, he said quietly. It was all I had. He set the papers down carefully. The storm clears, he'll be looking for you. He'll know where the stagecoach crashed. He'll follow the trail. There is no trail. The snow will have covered it. Elena. He waited until she looked at him. Men like Thornton don't give up. They don't let things go. You know that. So, what are you saying? That I should just give up? Hand these back and beg for mercy? I'm saying you need a better plan than hope. I don't have a better plan. Her voice broke. This was it. This was my one chance, and now it's... She couldn't finish, just shook her head and looked away. The cabin fell quiet except for the storm. Rowan felt the weight of the moment, the weight of her fear and his own. He thought about the rifle above the door, about how simple everything had been an hour before she screamed, about how he'd been ready to leave all of this behind, the complications, the choices, the messy business of caring about outcomes. But he'd opened the door. He'd walked into the storm, And now he was here, sitting across from a woman who'd chosen to fight back against something bigger than herself, who'd taken that fight and run with it even though it might kill her. There was something in that, something he recognized, the refusal to go quietly. "Okay," he heard himself say. Elena looked up. "Okay, what?" "Okay, when the storm breaks, we figure out your next move, together." "Why would you don't even know me." "No, but I know men like Thornton, and I know what it's like to feel powerless." He paused. "And maybe I'm tired of hiding up here pretending the world doesn't exist." She stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack. This isn't your fight." "Maybe not, but I'm in it now anyway. Might as well make it mean something." Elena opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I don't understand you." "Join the club." "I don't understand me either most days." A sound came from her then, half laugh, half sob. She pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes bright. "This is insane." "Probably. We're going to die." "Maybe. He'll kill us both if he finds us." "Then we better make sure he doesn't." The wind howled, the fire crackled, and something shifted in the cabin, not the walls, not the structure, but something less tangible and more important. An alliance forming, two broken people deciding that maybe giving up wasn't the only option left. The day dragged on. The storm didn't let up. Rowan checked Elena's fingers and toes. The frostbite wasn't as bad as it could have been, but she'd lose some feeling in 2 fingers, maybe permanently. She took the news without flinching. They ate beans heated over the fire, drank more terrible coffee, and settled into an uneasy coexistence. Elena stopped watching him like he was a threat, started watching him like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "What was her name?" she asked finally, nodding at the photograph. "Sarah. My wife. The boy was Thomas, our son." "How did they—" She stopped. "Sorry, that's not—" "Fever. Swept through Millstone 5 years back. Took 30 people in 3 weeks, including them." "And you survived." "And I survived." He poked at the fire, sending sparks up. "Didn't feel like surviving for a long time after." "Is that why you're up here? Hiding from it?" "Hiding, grieving, waiting. Take your pick." He looked at her. "What about you? You said Thornton isn't your husband, but you worked for him. In his house." Elena pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "My father sold me to him. That's what it was, even if they didn't call it that. Sold me to pay off gambling debts. I was 16. Thornton said I'd work as a maid, that it was honest work. And it was. For a while. But then," her voice went flat, "then he decided he wanted more. And men like Marcus Thornton always get what they want." Rowan's hands clenched. "How long?" 12 years. 12 years I scrubbed his floors and pressed his shirts and smiled when he—" She stopped, reset. "But I learned things too. Learned how he operated. Learned where he kept his secrets. Learned that power isn't magic. It's just information and fear. And if you take away the information, the fear stops working." "So you took the information." "I took everything I could carry. Every paper that proved what he'd done. Every contract he'd forced someone to sign. Every deed he'd stolen. All of it." "When?" 4 days ago. There was a party. He was drunk. I slipped out during the chaos. Bought a ticket on the first stagecoach heading north. Thought if I could just get to Denver, get to someone who could actually do something with these papers." She gestured helplessly at the satchel. "Thought maybe it would matter." "It matters," Rowan said. "Does it? I'm stuck on a mountain. The coach driver's dead. Thornton probably has half the territory looking for me by now. Even if we get to Denver, what's to stop him from just—" She made a gesture like sweeping things off a table, making it all disappear, making me disappear. "We don't let him." "How?" "Good question. How did you fight someone who owned the law? Someone who could make evidence vanish and witnesses recant? Someone with enough money and power to bend reality to his will?" Rowan didn't have an answer, not yet, but there had to be one. There always was. You just had to be willing to look for it. "I knew a man once," he said slowly. Old trapper. He told me when you're hunting something bigger than you, something that should be able to kill you easy, you don't fight it head on. You use the terrain, use the weather, use everything it doesn't expect. We're not hunting, we're being hunted. Then we flip it, make him come to us, on our terms, where we have the advantage. Elena looked at him skeptically. What advantage? He has men, money, power. We have, what, stolen papers in a mountain cabin? We have something he doesn't. What's that? Nothing left to lose. The words hung there. Elena stared at him, and something in her expression shifted. Recognition again, understanding. You were going to kill yourself, she said. Last night. Before you heard me. That's what you were doing. Rowan didn't answer, didn't need to. So this, Elena gestured between them. This isn't about saving me. This is about you wanting something to die for. Maybe. Or maybe it's about finding something worth living for. Haven't decided yet. That's messed up. Yeah, probably. She laughed then. Actually laughed. Sharp and bitter, but real. We're both completely insane. Agreed. This is a terrible plan. It's barely even a plan. We're going to die. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. But she was smiling. Just a little. Just enough to soften the fear in her eyes. Night fell again. The storm finally started to ease, not stopping, but losing its edge. The wind shifted from a scream to a moan. The snow stopped trying to bury the cabin and settled for just piling higher. Elena slept better this time. Curled up by the fire, the satchel next to her but not clutched quite so desperately. Rowan watched her for a while, this stranger who'd crashed into his solitude and given him something he hadn't known he needed, a reason to care about tomorrow. He thought about the rifle, about how different everything would be if he'd pulled that trigger before her scream cut through the night. She'd be dead. He'd be dead. Thornton would win by default, and all those people whose lives he'd stolen would stay stolen. But he hadn't pulled the trigger, and that meant tomorrow was still possible. Rowan added wood to the fire, checked the windows, and finally let himself rest. His ribs ached. His whole body ached. But it was the good kind of ache, the kind that came from doing something, from fighting for something, from choosing to stay in the game even when the odds were garbage. Morning would bring new problems. Thornton's men searching, the journey down the mountain, the question of what happened next. But that was tomorrow's fight. Tonight, two people who'd both been ready to give up had found something worth holding on to. Even if that something was just each other, even if it probably wouldn't be enough. The storm broke on the third morning. Rowan woke to silence, real silence. Not the muffled quiet of snow falling, but the sharp emptiness that came after. He opened his eyes and saw sunlight cutting through the gaps in the shutters, thin blades of gold against the cabin's dim interior. Elena was already awake, sitting by the window with the shutter cracked open just enough to see out. Her breath fogged the cold air. It stopped, she said without turning around. Yeah. Rowan pushed himself up, ribs protesting. 3 days of rest hadn't healed them, but the sharp edge had dulled to a constant ache he could work through. Doesn't mean we're in the clear. I know. She closed the shutter and turned to face him. The fear was still there in her eyes, but something else had joined it. Determination, maybe. Or resignation. Hard to tell which. They'd spent the last 2 days planning, or trying to. Mostly they'd talked in circles, coming back to the same impossible problem. How do you fight someone who controls everything? Elena had the documents, proof of Thornton's corruption, but proof didn't matter if no one with power was willing to look at it. And everyone with power either worked for Thornton or owed him something. We could still run, Elena said. Keep going north, Canada, maybe. He can't reach that far. He can reach anywhere. Rowan stood, moved to the fire, started building it back up. And running means those documents stay hidden. All those people he stole from stay stolen from. Better than being dead. Is it? She didn't answer that. Rowan put coffee on, going through the morning routine that felt strange now with someone else here. The cabin had been his tomb for 3 years, quiet, isolated, safe from anything that might make him feel. Now it felt crowded, alive, dangerous in a completely different way. What if we went to Millstone? Elena asked suddenly. Your town. You said Thornton has contracts from there, people he stole from. What if we showed them the proof? Got them to stand together? Millstone's a company town now. Half the businesses answer to Thornton, the sheriff's on his payroll. But not everyone. There have to be people who'd fight back if they knew they could win. People are scared, Elena. Scared people don't fight. They survive. They keep their heads down and hope the storm passes them by. Like you did? The words hit harder than she probably meant them to. Rowan poured coffee with hands that wanted to shake. Yeah, like I did. But you stopped. You came out in the storm for me. That's different. How? He didn't have a good answer for that either, just handed her a cup and sat down across from her. The familiar space between them that had been 20 feet of hostile territory 3 days ago and now felt like something else. Partnership, maybe, or shared insanity. If we go to Millstone, Rowan said slowly, thinking it through, we'd need allies, people willing to stand up publicly. That's dangerous. Thornton will retaliate. He's going to retaliate anyway. At least this way some good comes from it. You're asking people to risk everything. They've already lost everything. They just don't know they can fight back yet. Elena leaned forward, intensity burning in her eyes. That's what these papers are. They're not just proof. They're ammunition. Thornton's power comes from people believing he's untouchable. But he's not. He's just a man who's been getting away with things because no one's challenged him. You challenged him. And look where it got me. Alive. Against the odds. With the evidence intact. Rowan took a drink of coffee, bitter and hot. Maybe that means something. Or maybe it just means I'm not dead yet. But she was smiling slightly. You really think Millstone would listen? I think some of them might, if we approach it right. If we give them a reason to believe it could work. And if they don't? Then we tried. That's more than most people do. Elena studied him over the rim of her cup. You've changed these last 3 days. You're different than when you found me. How so? Less, she searched for the word, less absent, like you were here but not here before. Now you're actually present. Rowan looked at his hands, calloused, scarred, the hands of a man who'd been alive but not living for longer than he wanted to admit. Having something to focus on helps. Is that all this is? A distraction? No. He met her eyes. No, it's not. Then what is it? A second chance, maybe, for both of us. He set his cup down. You get to stop running. I get to stop hiding. We both get to choose something different than what we've been choosing. That's pretty optimistic for a man who was about to blow his brains out 4 days ago. Maybe I needed a reason not to. Maybe you showed up at exactly the right time. Or exactly the wrong time for both of us. Guess we'll find out. They left an hour later after Rowan had packed supplies and Elena had checked the documents one more time, making sure the damp hadn't destroyed them beyond use. The satchel went over her shoulder. Rowan took his rifle, a knife, and enough dried meat and hardtack to get them down the mountain. The world outside was transformed. Snow had buried everything under 4 feet of white, drifts piled twice that high against the cabin's north wall. The sky was that painful blue that only came after storms, so bright it hurt to look at. Cold bit through their clothes immediately, but it was manageable, nothing like the killing wind of 3 days ago. Rowan strapped on his snowshoes and helped Elena with a spare pair. They didn't fit her well, but they'd work. Had to work. 8 miles to the Valley Road, then another 6 to Millstone. 14 miles through snow that would fight them every step. They started walking. The first mile was the hardest. Elena wasn't used to snowshoes, kept catching the frames on each other, nearly fell twice. Rowan went slow, patient, letting her find her rhythm. His ribs screamed with every step, every breath, but he gritted through it. Pain was just information. It told you that you were alive. By the second mile, Elena had gotten the hang of it. They moved faster, following the ridgeline down toward where Rowan knew the valley road cut through. The world was silent except for the crunch of snow under their shoes and their labored breathing. No birds, no wind, just cold and white, and the two of them pushing forward. Tell me about them, Elena said suddenly. Rowan glanced at her. Who? Your wife, your son. You don't have to, but she paused, breathing hard. Might help to talk about it. He almost said no, almost told her it was none of her business, that some things stayed buried for a reason. But then he thought about the photograph above the fireplace, about how he'd stopped looking at it because it hurt too much, and realized that maybe the hurt was the point. Maybe forgetting hurt worse. Sarah was practical, he said. That's the first word that comes to mind. Not romantic or soft or any of those things people say about women. She was practical, knew how to stretch $1, how to make a meal out of nothing, how to fix things that broke. Met her in Millstone. She was working at the general store. He stopped, started again. I was different then, younger. Thought I could build something, a life, a future. And you did. For a while. We got married, built a cabin just outside town, had Thomas 2 years later. Rowan's voice caught. He was 7 when the fever took them, just learning to read. Used to follow me around everywhere, asking questions about everything. Why's the sky blue? Where do the stars go in daytime? How come snow's white? He laughed, but it came out broken. Drove Sarah crazy sometimes, but I loved it. Loved that he was curious, loved that he wanted to know how things worked. What happened? With the fever? Doctor said it came up from the mining camps. Spread fast. Sarah got sick first, then Thomas. I tried everything, kept them cool, forced water down them, sat up nights praying to anyone who'd listen. But it didn't matter. Sarah went first. Thomas held on for another day. I was holding his hand when he couldn't finish, just stopped walking, standing there in the snow, chest heaving. Elena stopped too. Didn't touch him, didn't offer empty comfort, just stood there with him while he pulled himself back together. After, Rowan continued finally, I couldn't stay in that cabin, couldn't stay in town. Everywhere I looked, I saw them. So I came up here. Figured if I was far enough away, maybe it would stop hurting. But it doesn't. It just gets quieter, more manageable, until you're not sure if you're healing or just going numb. I know that feeling, Elena said softly. The numb part. I lived in Thornton's house for 12 years. After a while, you stop feeling things. It's easier that way. Safer. Feeling means caring, and caring means it can hurt you worse. But you still cared enough to steal from him, to run. That wasn't caring. That was rage. Her voice was flat. Pure rage that had nowhere to go for 12 years until suddenly I saw a chance to do something with it, to make it mean something. They started walking again. The sun climbed higher, making the snow sparkle like crushed diamonds. Beautiful. Deadly. The kind of beauty that could kill you if you stopped respecting it. By the 4th mile, they reached the wreckage. The stagecoach was still there, buried deeper now, one wheel jutting from a drift like a broken bone. Rowan approached it carefully, rifle ready, though he wasn't sure what he was expecting. Bears, maybe. Or wolves drawn to the smell of death. But there was nothing, just the coach, and the snow, and the silence. The driver, Elena said, his name was Patterson, James Patterson. He had a wife in Denver, 3 kids. You knew him? We talked, on the ride, before. She gestured at the wreck. He was kind, didn't ask questions, just said he'd get me where I needed to go. She moved closer to the coach, looking for something. We should find him, bury him if we can. Ground's frozen solid, we can't dig. Then we cover him at least, he deserves that much. They searched, found him 20 yards from the coach, half buried under snow that had drifted over him during the storm. Frozen solid. Face peaceful, like he'd just gone to sleep. Quick death, at least. Better than suffering. Rowan and Elena piled rocks over the body, working in silence. It wasn't a proper burial, but it was something. A marker. An acknowledgement that this person had existed, had mattered, had died trying to help someone. When they finished, Elena stood there for a long moment, looking down at the pile of rocks. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I'm sorry I got you killed. He made a choice, Rowan said. Same as we're all making choices. He chose to help. That's worth something. Is it? He's dead. His wife's a widow. His kids have no father, because I asked him to drive me north in winter. Elena, Don't. She turned away. Don't tell me it's not my fault. I know whose fault it is. I know exactly who's responsible. And when we get to Millstone, when we show people those papers, I'm going to make damn sure everyone else knows too. They pushed on. The valley road appeared after another hour of walking, just a vague depression in the snow where the drifts weren't quite as high. No tracks. No sign anyone had passed this way since the storm hit. That was good and bad. Good because it meant Thornton's men hadn't found the wreck yet. Bad because it meant they were coming through completely untouched snow, making a trail a blind man could follow. They'll track us, Elena said, voicing what Rowan was thinking. Soon as they find the coach, they'll see which way we went. Let them. By the time they follow the trail, we'll already be in Millstone. In public. Harder to make us disappear when there's witnesses. You're assuming Thornton cares about witnesses. I'm assuming he's smart enough not to make himself look guilty. Man like that, his power comes from appearing legitimate. He starts killing people in broad daylight. That veneer cracks. And if I'm wrong, then we die fighting instead of running. I can live with that. Elena laughed, sharp, bitter. Can you? Funny thing to say for a man who was ready to die alone 4 days ago. 4 days ago, I didn't have a reason to fight. Now I do. What reason? You. Those papers. The chance that maybe something I do will actually matter instead of just being, he gestured vaguely. Noise. Static. Existence without purpose. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. You asked. They walked in silence after that, conserving energy, focusing on keeping pace. The sun tracked across the sky. Rowan's ribs throbbed. Elena's fingers, the ones with frostbite, had started hurting again as circulation returned, but she didn't complain, just kept putting one foot in front of the other. Millstone came into view as the sun started its descent toward the mountains. Small town, maybe 300 people, built around a silver mine that had played out 5 years back. Now it survived on timber and through traffic and the kind of stubborn refusal to die that defined mountain towns. Rowan hadn't been here in 6 months, hadn't wanted to see people, hadn't wanted to answer questions about why he was still alive when Sarah and Thomas weren't. But looking at it now, he felt something unexpected, not quite relief, but close. Recognition, maybe. This place had been home once. There, Elena said, pointing to a building on the main street. That's the general store, right? Public place. Lots of witnesses. Yeah, old man Garrett runs it. He's fair. Doesn't owe Thornton anything that I know of. Then that's where we start. They came down from the mountain like ghosts, snow-covered and exhausted, stumbling into Millstone just as the shops were closing for the day. People stared. Rowan knew some of them. Mrs. Chen from the boarding house, Tom Miller, who ran the livery, others whose names he'd forgotten or never learned. No one approached them, just watched as they made their way to the general store. The bell above the door rang as they entered. Warmth hit them immediately. Wood stove burning in the corner, the familiar smell of flour and coffee and lamp oil. Garrett was behind the counter, old and weathered as the mountains themselves, and his eyes went wide when he saw Rowan. Hale? He said it like he wasn't sure he believed it. That you? Yeah, Garrett, it's me. Thought you were dead. Been 3 years since... He stopped, looked at Elena. Who's this? Someone who needs help. We both do. Rowan moved to the counter, feeling every mile they'd walked in his bones. We need to talk. Somewhere private. And we need to talk to others too. People who've had dealings with Judge Thornton. Garrett's expression closed down immediately. Don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Everyone in this town knows. They just don't talk about it because they're scared. Being scared's smart when it comes to Marcus Thornton. Being scared's what keeps him in power. Elena stepped forward, pulling the satchel off her shoulder and setting it on the counter. We have proof. Documents. Contracts. Everything he's done to people in this town and others. Everything he's stolen. We can stop him. But we need help. Help? Garrett laughed, but there was no humor in it. Girl, you have any idea what you're asking? Thornton owns half the territory. He's got the sheriff, the mayor, judges. He is a judge, Elena interrupted. And that's exactly why we need to fight back. Because if we don't, Who will? Someone smarter than us. There is no one smarter. There's just people who are willing and people who aren't. She opened the satchel and pulled out one of the documents, unfolded it, set it on the counter. This is your contract, the one you signed 3 years ago when your store caught fire and you needed money for repairs. Thornton gave you a loan at 30% interest. When you couldn't pay, he took ownership of your inventory. Legally. According to this paper. Garrett stared at the document like it was a snake. Where'd you get that? From his house. From his office. I worked there. I saw what he did to people. To you. To dozens of others. Elena's voice was steady, hard. He doesn't own this store, Garrett. You do. The contract's illegal. He falsified the interest rates, forged witnesses. I watched him do it, and I can prove it. Even if that's true, it is true. Even if it is, what good does it do me? So the contract's fake. Thornton will just make a new one, or burn this place down, or worse. Not if enough people stand together, not if we expose him publicly. He can't fight everyone. He doesn't have to fight everyone. He just has to fight enough to make an example. Rowan could see the fear in Garrett's eyes. Real fear, earned through experience. This wasn't a man who was being paranoid. This was a man who knew exactly what Thornton was capable of, and had made peace with staying small to stay alive. I know you're scared, Rowan said quietly. I don't blame you. But think about what happens if we don't do this. Thornton keeps taking, keeps stealing, keeps controlling, and eventually there's nothing left to steal. Town dies. Everyone moves on or stays and starves. Either way, he wins. He's winning anyway. Not if we fight back. Fighting back gets you killed. Living on your knees gets you killed slower. Rowan leaned on the counter, meeting Garrett's eyes. I've been dead for 3 years, Garrett. Walking around, breathing, but dead inside. And I'm telling you right now, that's worse than any bullet. That's worse than anything Thornton could do to me. Because I did it to myself. Garrett looked away. Looked at Elena. Looked at the document on the counter. Even if I wanted to help, he said slowly, I'm one man. One old man with a failing store. That's not enough to take down Marcus Thornton. It's a start, Elena said. And starts lead to momentum. Momentum leads to movements. Movements lead to change. Or they lead to massacres. Then we make sure it's the former. The door burst open. All three of them turned. A young man stood in the doorway, breathing hard, snow on his shoulders. Billy Carson, Rowan remembered, worked at the livery. Sheriff's coming, Billy said. Got 3 men with him. They're asking about a woman. Wanted fugitive, they're saying. Said she stole from Judge Thornton and murdered a stagecoach driver. Elena's face went pale. I know, Rowan cut her off. He turned to Garrett. You have a back door? Yeah, but... Show us. Now. Garrett hesitated for maybe 2 seconds. Then something in him shifted. Decision made. Line crossed. This way. He led them through the store, past shelves stocked with goods that probably should have sold out months ago, to a narrow door in the back. Opened it onto an alley. Boarding house is 3 buildings down, Garrett said. Mrs. Chen owes me a favor. Tell her I sent you. She'll hide you in the attic. Go. Thank you, Elena started. Don't thank me, just... Garrett looked at her, then at Rowan. Don't die, stupid. If you're going to fight this, fight it smart. They ran. The alley was narrow and dark, snow piled waist-high between buildings. Rowan grabbed Elena's hand and pulled her forward, his ribs screaming with every jarring step. Behind them, voices echoed from the main street, the sheriff's men spreading out, searching. There, Rowan pointed to a door 3 buildings down, painted faded blue. That's it. They stumbled through snow that grabbed at their legs, fighting for every foot. Elena's breathing was ragged, panicked. Rowan kept his grip on her hand, kept pulling her forward even when his vision started graying at the edges from the pain. He pounded on the door. Once, twice, it opened a crack. A woman's face appeared, Chinese, maybe 60, eyes sharp as broken glass. Mrs. Chen. Garrett sent us, Rowan gasped. Said you owed him. Inside. Now. She yanked the door wide. They fell through it into a kitchen that smelled like ginger and steam. Mrs. Chen slammed the door shut, threw the bolt, and turned on them. "Sheriff's looking for you?" "Yeah," Elena said. "You kill someone?" "No, but someone's saying I did." Mrs. Chen studied them both for a long moment. Then she nodded once, sharp. "Attic. Follow me. Don't touch anything, don't make noise, don't even breathe loud, understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Rowan said. She led them through the boarding house, quiet halls, closed doors, the sound of someone coughing in one of the rooms. Up narrow stairs that creaked despite how carefully they moved. Then up more stairs, steeper, to a small door that opened onto an attic space barely tall enough to stand in. "Wait here," Mrs. Chen said. "I'll bring food later, if I can." "Why are you helping us?" Elena asked. Mrs. Chen's expression hardened. "Because Thornton took my husband's business 20 years ago. Said he owed money. Said it was all legal. By the time we figured out the contract was fake, we had nothing left to fight with. My husband died broken. So yeah, I'll help anyone fighting that bastard, even if it gets me killed." She closed the door, and they were alone in the darkness. Rowan found a corner and sank down, back against the wall, trying to breathe through the pain in his chest. Elena sat beside him, close enough that he could feel her shaking. "They're going to find us," she whispered. "Maybe." "No maybe about it. This is a small town. How long before someone talks? How long before the sheriff searches every building?" "Long enough for us to figure out next moves." "What next moves?" "We're trapped. Thornton's men are here, and now everyone thinks I'm a murderer." Her voice cracked. "I didn't kill Patterson. The storm killed him. The crash—" "I know. But they don't. They'll believe whatever Thornton tells them to believe. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." Rowan turned to look at her in the dim light filtering through gaps in the roof. "So we change how it works." "How? We can't even leave this attic without getting arrested." "Then we don't leave. We bring people to us." Elena stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Bring people. Rowan, we're fugitives hiding in an attic. What people are going to come to us?" "The ones Thornton's hurt, the ones who still have fight left in them." He shifted, wincing. "Garrett knows we're here. Mrs. Chen knows. Word will spread. Carefully, quietly. But it'll spread. People in this town know each other, trust each other more than they trust the sheriff." "That's a lot of assumptions. It's all we've got." They sat in silence, listening to footsteps on the street below, voices calling out, doors opening and closing as the sheriff's men conducted their search. Every sound made Elena flinch. Every creak of the building made Rowan's hand move to the rifle he'd propped against the wall. But no one came up the stairs. Hours passed. The light through the roof gaps faded from gray to black. Cold settled into the attic, not as brutal as the mountain, but enough to make them press closer together for warmth. "Tell me about Thornton," Rowan said finally, breaking the silence. "Not what he did. Who he is. I need to know what we're fighting." Elena pulled the blanket. Mrs. Chen had left one, thin and moth-eaten, tighter around her shoulders. "He's 52, never married, lives alone in that big house except for the staff. Used to be a real judge 20 years back, but he figured out quick that being legitimate meant following rules. So he bought his way into positions where he could make the rules instead." "How'd he get the money for that?" "Family money originally. Then he started loaning it out. High interest. Predatory terms. When people couldn't pay, he'd take their assets. Legal foreclosure. All on paper. All legitimate. By the time people realized they'd been cheated, it was too late." "And no one stopped him?" "Who was going to stop him? He owned the people who were supposed to enforce the law. He had judges. Real judges in his pocket. Politicians. Business owners. Anyone who could have challenged him either worked for him or was too scared to try. But you tried." "I didn't have a choice." Elena's voice went flat again, that tone she used when talking about things that hurt too much to feel. "When I was 16, I thought I could endure anything. Thought if I just kept my head down, did what I was told, eventually I'd be free. But years passed and nothing changed. I got older, he got older, and I realized this was it. This was my life unless I did something about it. So you stole the documents." "I stole everything I could." Every paper that proved what he'd done. Every contract, every deed, every forgery. 12 years of watching him operate. 12 years of seeing how he did it. I knew where he kept things. Knew which documents mattered. Knew who he'd hurt worst. And you thought taking them would be enough. I thought getting them to someone who could actually use them would be enough. A lawyer. A newspaper. Someone outside his reach. She laughed bitterly. Stupid. He doesn't have a reach. He has tentacles. They go everywhere. A board creaked somewhere below them. Both of them froze. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming up the stairs. Rowan grabbed his rifle, brought it to his shoulder. Elena pressed herself against the wall, hand over her mouth to muffle her breathing. The footsteps reached the landing, paused. Then a quiet knock. 3 times. A pause. 2 more. "That's Mrs. Chen's signal," Elena whispered. Garrett must have told her to use it. Rowan lowered the rifle slightly, but kept it ready. "Come in." The door opened. Mrs. Chen stood there with a tray, food, coffee, 2 blankets that looked newer than the one she'd left before. Behind her stood Garrett, and behind him, 2 others. A woman Rowan didn't recognize in Tom Miller from the livery. "Sheriff searched here 2 hours ago," Mrs. Chen said without preamble. "Didn't check the attic. He's done for tonight, but he'll be back tomorrow. You have until then to decide what you're doing." "We're fighting," Elena said. "That's what we're doing." "Fighting how?" The woman Rowan didn't know stepped forward. She was younger than the others, maybe 30, with a hard look that spoke of experience. "I'm Margaret Webb. Thornton took my family's ranch 5 years ago. My father signed a contract he didn't understand. By the time we realized what he'd done, we had 6 months to vacate. No compensation, no recourse, just gone. So yeah, I want to fight, but I want to know how." Elena reached for the satchel, pulled out documents, spread them on the attic floor. "These are proof. Contracts like the one your father signed, dozens of them, all forged or altered or using illegal terms. If we can show these to enough people, if we can get them to stand together and demand investigation..." "Investigation from who?" Tom Miller cut in. "Sheriff works for Thornton. Judges work for Thornton. Who's going to investigate?" "Federal marshals," Rowan said. Everyone turned to look at him. "Thornton's reach goes far, but it doesn't go to Washington. We get these documents to federal authorities, they have to act. That's corruption on a territorial level. That's the kind of thing that gets politicians in the Capitol nervous." "And how do we get documents to Washington from here, Tayu?" Garrett asked. "Last I checked, the stage doesn't run through a telegraph wire. We take them ourselves, or we send someone we trust." "Through Thornton's territory? Through his men?" Margaret shook her head. "That's suicide." "So's doing nothing," Elena shot back. "Look, I know this is dangerous. I know we're asking you to risk everything, but you've already lost everything. Sitting quiet didn't save your ranch. It didn't save Garrett's store. It didn't save Mrs. Chen's husband. Thornton took it all anyway. At least this way you get to choose how the story ends." Silence fell over the attic. 5 people crammed into a space meant for storing forgotten things, looking at documents that represented years of theft and corruption, trying to decide if hope was worth dying for. "I'm in," Mrs. Chen said finally. "I'm old, don't have much left to lose, and I'm tired of watching that man destroy everything good in this town." "Me too," Margaret added. "My father died thinking he'd failed us. I want people to know he didn't, that he was cheated, that it wasn't his fault." Tom Miller looked at Garrett. Garrett looked at the documents, then at Rowan. "You really think this could work?" Garrett asked. "I think it's our only shot," Rowan said. "But yeah, I think if we do it right, if we're smart about it, we can hurt him, maybe even take him down." "That's not the same as winning." "No, but it's better than losing without trying." Garrett nodded slowly. "All right, I'm in. Tom?" Tom Miller sighed, ran a hand through his hair. "My wife's going to kill me. But yeah, I'm in." "Okay." Elena gathered the documents back into some kind of order. "We need a plan, a real one, not just hope and anger." "First thing," Rowan said, "we need more people. These documents, how many people do they represent? How many victims?" In Millstone alone? At least 20. Probably more. And that's just the ones I saw. He's been doing this for years across multiple towns. Then we find them, quietly. Bring them here or somewhere safe. Show them the proof. Get them to commit to standing together. Safety in numbers, Margaret said. Harder to make 20 people disappear than 1 or 2. Exactly. And while we're building that coalition, we get word out to other towns, to newspapers outside Thornton's control. Make noise. Make it public. Force him to respond in ways that expose him further. He'll come after us directly, Tom said. Soon as he realizes what we're doing, let him. If he comes at us publicly, violently, that proves everything we're saying about him. Right now, his power comes from appearing legitimate. We strip that away. He's just another criminal. A criminal with money and guns and men willing to use them, Garrett pointed out, which is why we need federal involvement. Why we need witnesses. Why we need this to be so public he can't bury it. Rowan looked at each of them in turn. I'm not going to lie to you. This is dangerous. Some of us might die. Probably will die. But if we pull it off, if we actually expose him, we change things. Not just for us. For everyone he's hurt. Everyone he would have hurt. That's got to be worth something. Mrs. Chen set the tray down. Eat, plan. I'll start spreading word tomorrow. Carefully. To people I trust. By tomorrow night, we'll know how many we can count on. And if the sheriff comes back, Elena asked, then you run. There's a root cellar in the back. Tunnel that leads to the old mine shaft half a mile out. Built it during the war in case of raids. Never needed it. Until now, maybe. They spent the next hour going through the documents more carefully, identifying victims, making lists, planning approaches. Rowan watched Elena work, focused, intense, her fear channeled into purpose. This woman who'd been running 3 days ago was now organizing a resistance movement from an attic. And him? He was right there with her, planning, strategizing, feeling something in his chest that wasn't grief or pain, but something sharper, hotter. Anger, maybe. Or purpose. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. The others left one by one, slipping out into the night with instructions and documents and a shared sense that they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Mrs. Chen went last, promising to return before dawn with news. Alone again, Rowan and Elena sat in the darkness, exhaustion finally catching up with them. You think they'll follow through? Elena asked quietly. Some will. Maybe not all. But enough. And if Thornton figures out what we're doing before we're ready, then we adapt, fight with what we have. She shifted closer, her shoulder against his. I'm scared. Me too. But you're still doing this. Yeah. Why? You could walk away, go back to your cabin, pretend you never found me. Rowan thought about that, about the rifle, about the trigger he'd been ready to pull, about how he'd spent 3 years building walls high enough that nothing could touch him. And then Elena had screamed and every wall had come down at once. Because I'm tired of being dead, he said finally. Tired of just existing. You gave me a reason to care about something again. Even if it kills me, at least I'll die mattering. That's dark. Yeah, but it's true. She leaned her head on his shoulder. For what it's worth, I'm glad you found me. Glad you didn't. She stopped, started again. Glad you opened the door. Me too. They sat like that for a long time, two broken people holding each other up in the darkness, waiting for dawn and whatever came with it. Dawn came with footsteps. Rowan woke to the sound of boots on stairs, many of them, moving fast. Elena jerked awake beside him, eyes wide with panic. The tunnel, she whispered. We need to... The door crashed open. Sheriff Dixon stood in the doorway with 4 men behind him, guns drawn. He was older than Rowan remembered, grayer, with eyes that looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. Rowan Hale, Dixon said. Been a while. Rowan stood slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. Sheriff, you're harboring a fugitive. That's a crime. She's not a fugitive. She's a victim. That's not what Judge Thornton says. He says she stole from him, says she murdered his stagecoach driver. That's serious charges. The driver died in the storm. The crash killed him. She didn't. I got a warrant here, says different. Dixon pulled a paper from his coat. Says I'm to bring Elena Voss in for questioning, dead or alive. Judge's preference is alive, but he's flexible. Elena stood, chin up, defiant despite the fear Rowan could see in her eyes. I have evidence. Proof that Thornton's been stealing from people for years, forging documents, breaking laws. You want to arrest someone? Arrest him. That's a serious accusation. I have serious proof. Then you can present it at trial, after you're in custody. There won't be a trial. Thornton will make sure of that. Dixon's expression didn't change. That's not my problem. My problem is enforcing the law, and the law says you're coming with me. No. Rowan stepped between them. She's not going anywhere. Rowan, don't. Elena started. You want her? You go through me. Dixon sighed, and for a moment he looked even more tired. Don't do this. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to. Then you'll have to. The men behind Dixon raised their rifles, 4 barrels pointed at Rowan's chest. He didn't move, didn't back down, just stood there, a human shield between Elena and the guns, knowing this was probably stupid, probably suicidal, but not caring because this was the line. This was where he decided what kind of man he was going to be. Last chance, Dixon said. She's got documents, Rowan said, speaking fast. Proof of what Thornton's done. Not just to her, to dozens of people. People in this town. She can prove it. Give her 5 minutes to show you. That's all. 5 minutes. If you still think she's lying after that, we'll come quietly. Dixon looked at him, then at Elena, then at the satchel on the floor. 5 minutes, he said finally. But my men keep their guns on you the whole time. Elena moved fast, pulling out documents, spreading them on the floor. Contracts, deeds, letters, all of it laid out like evidence at a crime scene. This is Garrett's contract, she said, pointing. The one Thornton used to take ownership of his inventory. See here? The interest rate is written as 30%. But look at the original entry. You can see where he altered it. It was supposed to be 3%. He added a 0. Dixon knelt, studying the document. Could be a mistake. Then explain this one and this one and this. Elena kept pulling papers. 23 different contracts, all altered, all with forged witnesses. I watched him do it. I was in his house for 12 years. I saw everything. If you saw crimes being committed, why didn't you report them? To who? You? You work for him. I work for the territory. Same thing in Thornton's world. Dixon stood looking at the documents, at Elena, at Rowan. Something was working behind his eyes. Calculation. Or maybe conscience. Hard to tell. Even if these are real, he said slowly, even if everything you're saying is true, this doesn't change the warrant. You're still wanted for theft, still wanted for questioning about Patterson's death. So question me, right here. Ask anything you want. It doesn't work that way. Then make it work that way. Elena's voice rose. You have the power to do that. You have the power to look at this evidence and decide whether you're going to be the sheriff who helped a corrupt judge cover his crimes or the sheriff who did the right thing. The right thing, Dixon repeated quietly. You know how many times I've heard that phrase? You know how many times doing the right thing got good people killed? So you just give up? Just let him win? I keep people safe. That's my job. And sometimes keeping people safe means not starting fights you can't win. We can win this one, Rowan said, if you help us, if you stand with us instead of with him. Dixon looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned to his men. Wait outside. Sheriff, one of them started. I said wait outside. They hesitated, then filed out, closing the door behind them. Dixon waited until their footsteps faded before speaking again. I've known about Thornton for years, he said quietly. Known he was dirty, known he was hurting people. But knowing and proving are different things, and proving and surviving are different things. You understand? I have a family, a wife, 2 daughters. Thornton's made it very clear what happens to people who cross him. So you're scared, Elena said. Yes, I'm scared, and I'm smart enough to know when I'm outgunned. But you're here. You came up here alone, sent your men away. Rowan stepped closer. Why? If you're just going to arrest her anyway, why are you listening? Dixon pulled out a chair, ancient thing, probably left in the attic decades ago, and sat down heavily. Because I'm tired. Tired of watching him destroy this town. Tired of enforcing laws I know are being used to hurt people. Tired of being the kind of man who chooses safety over principle. Then help us. How? Even if I wanted to, and I'm not saying I do, what could I do? I'm one sheriff in one small town. Thornton has reach, resources, power I can't match. You have legitimacy, Elena said. You have a badge. People trust you more than they trust him deep down. They might be scared of him, but they respect you. If you stand with us, others will follow. Or I'll just be the first one he destroys. Maybe, but you'll be destroyed knowing you tried. Is that worse than staying safe and knowing you didn't? Dixon closed his eyes, rubbed his face with both hands. When he opened them again, something had changed. Not resolve exactly, but resignation maybe. The look of a man who'd made a decision he knew would cost him everything. Show me the rest, he said. Every document you have. I want to see all of it. They spent 3 hours in that attic going through every document. Dixon didn't speak much, just read with the focused intensity of a man looking for reasons to walk away and finding none. Elena explained each contract, each forgery, each victim. Rowan watched the sheriff's face harden with every page turned. When they finished, Dixon sat back and stared at the pile of papers like they were something that might bite. This is worse than I thought, he said finally. Will you help us? Elena asked. I don't know yet. Let me think. He stood, paced the small space. If I do this, if I stand against Thornton, he'll come at me with everything. He'll claim I'm corrupt, plant evidence, threaten my family. That's what he does. Then we move your family first, Rowan said. Get them somewhere safe, somewhere he can't reach. There is nowhere he can't reach. There's Denver. There's the federal marshals. We get your family into protective custody, then we move. Dixon laughed bitterly. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's just necessary. The sheriff stopped pacing, looked out through a gap in the roof where morning light was streaming in. I became a lawman because I believed in justice, believed the system worked, spent 20 years learning how wrong I was, how the system only works for people who can afford to break it. So fix it, Elena said. You have the evidence now. You have witnesses willing to talk. All you need is the courage to act. Courage. He said the word like it tasted bad. Courage gets you killed in this territory. So does cowardice, just slower. Dixon turned to look at her. Really look at her. You're brave. I'll give you that. Foolish. But brave. I'm not brave. I'm just done being afraid. Something passed between them then. Recognition, maybe. Two people who'd spent years bending under Thornton's weight, deciding they were tired of staying bent. All right, Dixon said quietly. All right. Here's what we do. I tell my men the warrant was bad, that you're cooperating with an investigation. Buy us time to get organized. Meanwhile, you gather your coalition. Everyone Thornton's hurt. Everyone willing to stand witness. We make this public, big, loud. Force the territorial governor to pay attention. Thornton owns the governor, Rowan pointed out. Owns his campaign fund. Not the same thing. Governor's a politician. Politicians care about appearances. We make enough noise, show enough proof, he'll have to act or risk looking complicit. And when Thornton realizes what we're doing, he'll come for us. All of us. Which is why we need to move fast, get everything documented, get witnesses on record, get the story to newspapers outside his control. By the time he tries to shut us down, it'll be too late. The truth will already be out. Elena looked at Rowan. Rowan looked at Dixon. 3 people in an attic planning a war against someone who'd spent 20 years building an empire of fear. When do we start? Elena asked. Now. Right now. Dixon moved to the door, opened it. I'll handle my men. Tell them to spread word the fugitive situation is resolved. That'll buy us maybe 6 hours before Thornton gets suspicious. Use them well. He left. His footsteps echoed down the stairs. Then voices outside. Dixon giving orders, men dispersing. Then silence. Rowan and Elena sat there listening to their own breathing, trying to process what had just happened. Did that really just work? Elena said. Don't know yet. Ask me in 6 hours. If we're still alive in 6 hours. Yeah, if we're still alive. Mrs. Chen came up an hour later with food and news. Word had spread through channels Rowan didn't understand, signals and networks built over years of living under occupation, because that's what Thornton's rule was. Occupation. People had learned to communicate in ways that bypassed official channels, passed information through looks and gestures and carefully chosen words. 23 people wanted to meet, all of them Thornton victims, all of them willing to stand witness if they had protection. We don't have protection, Rowan said. We barely have a plan. Then you better figure out both, Mrs. Chen replied, because they're coming here tonight, after dark, every one of them risking everything to be here. Here? This boarding house? The old meeting hall behind it. Been abandoned since the mine closed. Big enough for 23 people. Private enough nobody will notice. And if someone does notice, then we fight. That's what you wanted, isn't it? A fight? Rowan looked at Elena. She nodded. Yeah, he said. That's what we wanted. Night fell like a hammer. Rowan and Elena moved through the boarding house's back entrance to the old meeting hall, a structure that had once housed union meetings and town assemblies, now fallen into disrepair. Broken windows, sagging roof. But the interior was intact enough, and more importantly, it was off the main street where curious eyes couldn't see. They arrived first, set up what few supplies they had, lanterns, the documents spread across an old table, chairs dragged from corners. Elena was shaking, nervous energy or fear or both. Rowan's ribs ached like fire, but he pushed through it. Pain was just information. It told him he was alive. The witnesses came in ones and twos. Garrett arrived first with Margaret Webb. Then Tom Miller and his wife Sarah, a woman Rowan had known before when he'd been part of this town. Then others. Some he recognized, some he didn't. A rancher named Cole who'd lost his land. A widow named Martinez who'd lost her husband's business. A young man barely 20 who'd inherited his father's debts and nothing else. 23 people total, all of them marked by what Thornton had taken. All of them here because they'd decided fear was worse than risk. Dixon showed up last with another man Rowan didn't know. Tall, gray-haired, wearing a suit that looked out of place in Millstone. This is Daniel Wright, Dixon said. Lawyer from Denver. Works with the Territorial Attorney's Office. I sent him a telegram yesterday. He came. Wright stepped forward, studying the room. I heard what you have. The sheriff filled me in. If half of what he said is true, we have enough to bring charges. Federal charges. But I need to verify everything. Interview witnesses. Document the evidence properly. How long will that take? Elena asked. Days, maybe a week. We don't have a week. Thornton will know something's wrong. He'll move against us. Then we work fast, and we work smart. Wright set down a leather case, opened it, pulled out paper and pens. I'll need statements from everyone, detailed statements. What Thornton did, when, how. I'll need the original documents Miss Voss took, and I'll need you all to understand. This is dangerous. Once we file charges, there's no taking it back. You'll be witnesses in a federal case against one of the most powerful men in the territory. That makes you targets. We're already targets, Cole said. Been targets for years. At least now we're armed targets. Armed with what? Truth? Wright shook his head. Truth doesn't stop bullets. No, Rowan said. But enough people standing together might. That's what we're counting on. Safety in numbers. Publicity. Force Thornton to fight in the light instead of the dark. Wright studied him. You're Hale, the mountain recluse. Dixon mentioned you. That's me. Why are you involved in this? You don't appear in any of these documents. Thornton didn't steal from you. No, he just made a world where good people like my wife and son died because there was no doctor, no medicine, no help. Because everything in this town flows through him, and he doesn't care about anything that doesn't make him money. Rowan felt the anger rising, hot and clean. So yeah, I'm involved. We all are. Because this isn't just about contracts and land. It's about whether we live in a place where power means you can do whatever you want, or whether there's still such a thing as justice. Silence fell over the hall. Then Wright nodded slowly. All right, let's get to work. They worked through the night. Wright interviewed each witness, taking notes in precise handwriting, asking questions that dug deep. Elena provided documents for each case, matching contracts to victims, building a timeline of Thornton's crimes that stretched back decades. Rowan watched it all take shape, this coalition born from pain and anger and desperate hope. These people who'd been broken individually but together formed something harder to break, something that might actually have teeth. Around 3 a.m, someone knocked on the door. Everyone froze. Dixon moved to it, hand on his gun. Who is it? Billy Carson, from the livery. Got news. Dixon opened the door a crack. Billy slipped in, breathing hard, eyes wide. Thornton's here, in town. Came in an hour ago with 8 men. They're armed. They're going door to door looking for the woman. How much time do we have? Rowan asked. Not much. They hit the boarding house already. Mrs. Chen told them she didn't know anything, but they tore the place apart, found the attic, found where you were hiding. They know you're somewhere in town. Elena's face went pale. We need to run. No. Wright stood, gathering papers. Running's what he expects, what he wants. This is when we stand. Sheriff, can you deputize every person in this room? Dixon blinked. What? Deputize them. Make them legal. Give them authority to resist. Thornton's men have no jurisdiction here. You're the law. Use it. He'll claim I'm harboring fugitives. Then make sure everyone here has legal standing before he can claim anything. Wright pulled out a card, handed it to Dixon. I'm an officer of the territorial court. I can witness deputizations. Make them legal, right now. Dixon looked at the card, looked at the room full of people, then at Rowan and Elena. This is insane, he said. Yeah, Rowan agreed, but we're past sane now. Dixon raised his right hand. Everyone who's willing, raise your hand and repeat after me. Hands went up. All 23 of them. Even the widow Martinez, who had to be 70. Even young Cole, who looked terrified but determined. Dixon swore them in, quick, efficient. Wright signed each name on an official document that looked legitimate enough to matter. Now you're all deputies, Dixon said, legal representatives of the law in this territory. If Thornton's men try to take anyone here by force, it's assault on a peace officer, federal offense. He won't care, Margaret said. He'll just shoot us. Maybe. But now if he does, it's not just murder. It's killing federal deputies. That brings marshals. That brings the army if it has to. He's careful. He won't risk that kind of attention. You hope, someone muttered. Yeah, I hope. Footsteps outside. Many of them. Moving fast. The door crashed open. Thornton stood in the doorway with 4 men behind him, all carrying rifles. He was exactly what Rowan had imagined. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of face that looked reasonable until you looked closer and saw the coldness in the eyes. The absolute certainty that he was entitled to whatever he wanted. Elena, Thornton said, his voice smooth as oil. There you are. We've been looking for you. Judge Thornton. Dixon stepped forward. This is official law enforcement business. You need to leave. Law enforcement? Sheriff, I have a warrant for that woman's arrest. You're interfering with justice. Your warrant's fraudulent, based on false charges. Miss Voss is cooperating with an investigation into criminal activity in this territory. What investigation? Into you. Dixon's voice was steady. Into 20 years of fraud, forgery, and theft. We have documents, witnesses, evidence of systematic corruption. You're being charged with multiple federal crimes. Thornton laughed. Actually laughed. Are you seriously, Dixon? Have you lost your mind? You're accusing me based on what? Papers stolen by a servant? Testimony from people who owe me money? That's not evidence. That's desperation. Then you won't mind if federal authorities review everything. You won't mind if we bring in marshals to investigate. You won't mind if the territorial attorney's office looks into your contracts. I don't mind at all, because it won't matter. I own the territorial attorney. I own the judges. I own enough politicians to make this disappear before it ever sees a courtroom. Thornton's smile was a blade. You think you're the first person to try this? You think no one stood against me before? They all failed. They all ended up broken or dead or wishing they'd never tried. Maybe, Elena said, stepping forward. But I watched you for 12 years. I know how you operate. I know every bribe you've paid, every threat you've made, every person you've destroyed, and I documented all of it, every name, every transaction. It's not just contracts, it's ledgers, financial records, correspondence, everything. Thornton's smile slipped slightly. You're lying. Am I? Want to risk it? She pulled more papers from the satchel. Here's the payment you made to Judge Callahan in Denver to dismiss charges against your mining operation. Here's the letter you wrote to Senator Morris, promising campaign contributions if he'd kill the land reform bill. Here's the contract you have with Sheriff Baker in Silver Creek to look the other way on your smuggling operation. Those are forgeries. Then explain the signatures, explain the dates, explain why I have receipts matching every transaction. Elena's voice was rising now, powerful, certain. You're done, Marcus. You just don't know it yet. Thornton's face went hard. You stupid girl. You think papers matter? You think testimony matters? I've buried bigger threats than you. I'll bury this one too. Not this time. Wright stepped forward. I'm Daniel Wright, Territorial Attorney's Office. As of this morning, formal charges have been filed against you in federal court. Judge Thornton, you're under investigation for corruption, fraud, and racketeering. The evidence has been forwarded to Washington. Copies have been sent to newspapers in Denver, Salt Lake City, and San Francisco. By tomorrow, this story will be everywhere. Thornton stared at him. You're bluffing. Am I? Want to risk it? The silence that followed was electric. Thornton's men shifted nervously. Thornton himself stood frozen, calculations running behind his eyes. He was trying to figure out how much was real, how much was bluff, how much danger he was actually in. Even if this is true, he said slowly, even if charges are filed, it'll take months to investigate. Years, maybe. I have lawyers. I have time. And time means witnesses disappear. Evidence gets lost. Memories get fuzzy. That's why we're not waiting, Dixon said. That's why everyone in this room is now a deputized peace officer. That's why federal marshals are already en route. That's why this isn't going away quietly. You wanted to make an example of Elena? We're making an example of you. Thornton's jaw clenched. This is a mistake. All of you. You're making a terrible mistake. Maybe, Rowan said, speaking for the first time, but it's our mistake to make. And we're making it together. That's the difference between you and us. You operate alone. Use people, then throw them away. We stand together. And together, we're stronger than you ever were. You don't know what I'm capable of. Sure I do. You're capable of hurting people who can't fight back, of stealing from people who trust the system, of hiding behind legitimacy while you destroy lives. But you're not capable of facing real opposition, real consequences. That terrifies you. I can see it in your eyes. Thornton's hand moved toward his coat. Every deputy in the room raised a weapon. 23 guns pointed at 5 men. The math was simple. Don't, Dixon said quietly. You draw that gun. This ends badly for everyone, especially you. You think you can threaten me in my own territory? It's not your territory anymore. That's what you don't understand. It stopped being yours the moment these people decided to stop being afraid. Thornton looked around the room, saw the faces staring back at him, people he'd stolen from, people he'd hurt, people who'd finally had enough. Something shifted in his expression. Not fear exactly, but recognition maybe. The realization that he'd miscalculated, that power built on fear and corruption wasn't as solid as power built on legitimacy. This isn't over, he said finally. Yeah, Elena said. It is. You just haven't accepted it yet. Thornton turned and walked out. His men followed. The door closed. Nobody moved for a long moment. Then someone laughed, nervous, relieved, slightly hysterical. Then someone else. Then the whole room was laughing, the tension breaking like a dam, years of fear and anger pouring out in waves. Is it really over? Margaret asked. Not yet, Wright said. We still have to see this through, get the evidence properly filed, testimony recorded. But we won the first battle. That's something. Dixon holstered his gun. We need guards, shifts. Nobody goes anywhere alone. Thornton might have backed down tonight, but that doesn't mean he won't try something else. They organized, set watches, divided responsibilities. The meeting hall became a command center, the coalition a small army determined to see this through. Rowan found Elena outside as dawn was breaking. She was sitting on an old crate, staring at the mountains where he'd found her 5 days ago. Seemed like years ago now. Like they'd both lived entire lifetimes between then and now. You okay? He asked. I don't know. Ask me when this is really over. Might be a while. Yeah. She looked at him. Thank you. For everything. For not leaving me in that coach. For standing with me. For... Her voice caught. For making me believe this could work. You're the one who made it work. You're the one who had the courage to steal those documents, to run, to fight back. We both did. Together. She stood, moved closer. What happens now, after this? When the trials are done and Thornton's in prison or dead or whatever happens to men like him? Rowan thought about his cabin, about the photograph above the fireplace, about 3 years of silence and grief and slow death. I go back to living, he said. Actually living, not just existing. On the mountain? Alone? Maybe not alone. If you wanted... He stopped, started again. There's room, in the cabin, if you need somewhere to go, somewhere safe. Elena smiled. You asking me to move in with you, Rowan Hale? Asking if you want to, no pressure, just an option. If you want it. She stepped closer, took his hand. Her fingers were cold, the frostbitten ones still bandaged, but her grip was strong. Yeah, she said. Yeah, I want it. The trials took 3 months. Federal marshals came within a week, secured all the evidence, took statements from every witness. The territorial attorney tried to intervene, claim jurisdiction, but Wright had built the case too well. Federal crimes meant federal courts, and suddenly Thornton's bought and paid for judges had no power. Thornton fought, brought in expensive lawyers from back east, claimed the documents were forged, the witnesses were lying, the whole thing was a conspiracy against him. But the evidence was overwhelming. 23 victims, dozens of forged contracts, financial records showing bribes to officials across the territory. The newspapers ate it up. Judge on trial for corruption. Mountain Town brings down territory's most powerful man. Coalition of victims exposes decades of fraud. The story spread, and with it, more victims came forward. From other towns, other territories. People Thornton had hurt over 30 years of building his empire. It all came down. The verdict came in late spring. Guilty on 47 counts. Conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, bribery. The judge, a real judge this time, not one of Thornton's puppets, sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison. They took him away in chains. Elena watched from the courtroom gallery, Rowan beside her. She didn't cry, didn't cheer, just watched the man who'd controlled her life for 12 years get let out in handcuffs, and something in her face finally relaxed. Not peace, but the absence of fear, which was close enough. It's done, she said quietly. Yeah, it's done. They went back to Millstone for a week, helped people sort through the legal mess Thornton's conviction had created, properties returned to their rightful owners, debts declared fraudulent and voided, the town slowly coming back to life as the weight lifted. Then they went back to the mountain. The cabin was exactly as Rowan had left it. Snow had melted, revealing the logs, the rough-hewn walls, the small plot where Sarah had tried to grow vegetables years ago. He stood there looking at it, this place that had been his tomb, and tried to figure out how it could become something else. Elena stood beside him. It's smaller than I thought. Yeah, but we can expand. Build an addition. Make it... He stopped, smiled. Make it a home instead of a grave. I like that plan. They worked through the summer, building, repairing, expanding the cabin until it was twice its original size, adding windows that let in light, clearing the old garden plot and planting vegetables, herbs, even some flowers Elena insisted on. Other people came to visit. Dixon, bringing news from town. Margaret, who'd gotten her ranch back and was rebuilding. Wright, who'd been promoted and wanted to thank them for the case that had made his career. Garrett came up once, looked around, shook his head. You two really are crazy, living up here, together, after everything. Maybe, Rowan agreed, but it's our kind of crazy. The photograph of Sarah and Thomas stayed above the fireplace. Rowan didn't take it down, didn't need to anymore. They were part of his past, part of what had shaped him, but they didn't define his future anymore. Elena understood that, never asked him to forget, never tried to replace what he'd lost. Just built something new beside it, something that honored what had been while making space for what could be. One night in late autumn, they sat on the porch they'd built, watching the sun set over the mountains. The air was crisp, fall turning toward winter, but not cold yet, not dangerous. Just the kind of perfect evening that made you grateful to be alive. Think Thornton's suffering in prison? Elena asked. Hope so. Me too. She leaned against him. Think we changed anything? Really changed anything? Or did we just win one fight? We changed things for the people in Millstone, for everyone who got their property back, for everyone who won't be victimized by him in the future. Rowan thought about it. And we changed ourselves. We stopped being victims, started being people who fight back. That's not nothing. No, it's not nothing. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other in a storm and decided to build something better than what they'd lost. It wasn't perfect. The cabin still leaked when it rained hard. Elena's fingers still hurt sometimes from the frostbite. Rowan's ribs ached when the weather changed. But they were alive. Actually alive. Not just surviving, but living with purpose and presence and the kind of stubborn hope that had pulled them both through the worst moments. On a brutal winter night 6 months ago, Rowan had pressed a rifle to his head and prepared to end everything. Then Elena had screamed, and he'd chosen to open the door instead, to step back into the storm, to fight for something beyond himself. Best decision he'd ever made. The mountain hadn't broken them. It had tested them, challenged them, pushed them to edges they didn't know they could survive. But they had survived. Together. And now they were building something new. Not just a cabin, not just a life, but a future that proved broken people could heal, that victims could become fighters, that even when the world seemed designed to crush you, you could still choose to stand up. Elena reached over and took Rowan's hand. Her grip was strong despite the damaged fingers. His grip was steady despite the scars. Thank you, she said, for finding me, for saving me. Thank you for screaming, he replied, for giving me a reason to keep living. They sat together as darkness fell, watching stars appear one by one in the clear mountain sky, two people who'd chosen life over death and each other over solitude. The storm had passed. The fight was won. And what remained was possibility, pure, simple, beautiful possibility. It was enough. It was everything.